planet is not finished. Even now, it is still building itself. Folding rock, boiling oceans, lifting mountains grain by grain. Most of that work happens far from roads, far from cities, far from witnesses. And that is where this journey begins. Because while maps look complete, the world is not evenly known. Vast regions remain barely visited, not conquered, not softened, places where human presence is a brief interruption, not the rule.
So if you want more journeys into the unforgiving, the beautiful, and the unknown, subscribe. Hit that button and join us as we explore the places that don't fit on postcards.
And the question is simple. If these places still exist, how impossible are they really? The first landscapes do not announce themselves. They hide behind distance. Waterfalls plunge where no crowds gather. Valleys open only to those willing to walk until the silence thickens. In these places, water does not decorate the land. It attacks it. It cuts. It pounds. It reshapes stone that once believed it was permanent. Some falls drop so far that sound arrives before sight. The air fills with mist long before the water comes into view. Rainbows appear not as spectacle, but as physics, light bent by violence. The ground trembles. The cliff face retreats, slowly, year by year, grain by grain. This is erosion measured not in minutes, but in ages. Elsewhere, water freezes and refuses to leave. Ancient ice caps sit like time capsules, compacted snowfall layered over tens of thousands of years. Each band holds a record of atmosphere long gone. Dust from vanished deserts, ash from forgotten eruptions. Locked inside is enough fresh water to redraw coastlines if released. And yet it holds. For now, ice does not move quickly, but it never stops. From frozen heights, the land suddenly turns violent. Volcanoes rise where tectonic plates argue beneath the crust. Some erupt with warning, others do not bother. Lava spills openly into the air, not hidden by smoke or distance. At night, the mountain glows, an exposed furnace connected directly to the planet's interior. Standing nearby feels wrong, like witnessing something unfinished. The ground is hot. The air smells of sulfur and metal. Explosions throw fire upward, not as disaster, but as routine. This is not an exception. This is Earth doing what it has always done. Geothermal fields stretch across barren plains. Pools bubble in unnatural colors, acid green, rust red, blinding white. Minerals stain the ground like spilled paint. Nothing here is stable. The surface is thin. Heat moves upward constantly, reshaping the land from below. Beyond the heat, the land fractures into islands. Remote archipelagos sit far from continental influence. Winds shape them. Waves isolate them. Over time, life adapts or disappears. Plants shrink. Reptiles change. Birds forget how to fly. Evolution moves without interference, taking paths that would never survive elsewhere. On these islands, ecosystems are not diverse. They are precise. Every species fills a narrow role. Remove one and the system falters. Coral reefs bloom underwater. Layered cities built by organisms smaller than a fingernail. Fish gather in impossible numbers. Predators patrol with efficiency refined over millennia. Isolation does not weaken life. It sharpens it. Then the moisture vanishes. Deserts take over where oceans once stood. Dunes stretch in parallel lines across the horizon, shaped by prevailing winds that have not changed direction in thousands of years. The sand is not random. It is organized, disciplined. Days burn, nights freeze. And yet, the land records everything. Footprints preserved until the next wind erases them. Beneath the sand, ancient riverbeds lie buried. Proof that this dryness is temporary in geological terms. Canyons cut deep into plateaus, exposing layers like pages in a book. Each band of rock marks a different climate, a different world. Basalt columns rise where lava once cooled slowly, cracking into geometric perfection. No architect planned this. No correction followed. It simply worked. And humans arrive late, where cliffs rise sheer and vertical. People carve faith into stone. Monasteries cling to rock faces where access is a challenge by design. Silence becomes part of worship. The land itself filters who may enter. Elsewhere, Sacred peaks dominate plains. Volcanic plugs rise alone, visible for days of travel. Pilgrims climb them not because it is easy, but because effort gives meaning. Spirituality here is not abstract, it is physical. Belief follows geography. Some places seem hostile by design. Rivers run red with iron and acid, hostile to most known life. And yet, microbes thrive. They're organisms that feed on chemistry instead of sunlight. These landscapes resemble what scientists imagine other planets might look like. Studying them is not curiosity. It is rehearsal. Deep lakes hide beneath forest canopies. Their waters so clear and deep they appear unreal. Light penetrates far below the surface. The chemistry is delicate. Disturb it, and the balance collapses. These are not tourist attractions. They are laboratories. Across continents, extremes repeat in different forms. In low-lying depressions, heat and salt dominate. The air shimmers. Crystals grow naturally across the ground. Pools form and vanish. Colors shift by the hour. Life exists at the edge of tolerance. In high latitudes, wind scours exposed rock until nothing remains but skeletal ridges. Plants grow flat against the ground. Animals migrate or endure. People who live here measure distance differently. Survival is not dramatic. It is routine. And yet, people live here. Fishing villages cling to cliffs. Desert communities trace ancient routes between wells. Mountain towns remain connected by single roads carved into impossible slopes. These are not accidents. They are decisions repeated across generations. Industry arrives cautiously, then boldly. Mines open where minerals surface. Drilling rigs rise where oil hides below tundra. Railways push through permafrost and forest, linking remote interiors to ports and markets. Steel crosses landscapes that once knew only footpaths and rivers. Some corridors carry heavy shadows. Forest labor built roads where winter kills machinery. Camps once stood where trees now grow again. History does not vanish simply because vegetation returns. It lingers in place names and broken foundations, in routes that still exist because suffering once made them possible. Beyond those corridors, the land widens again. Forests reclaim abandoned structures. Wildlife returns where humans retreat. Rivers continue to move sediment toward seas that rise and fall regardless of borders. Then comes the edge. The far reaches of continents narrow into peninsulas and straits. Mountains fall into water. Two oceans meet, but do not mix easily. Currents collide. Weather changes abruptly. This is not a boundary humans invented. It is one the planet enforces. On the other side, the world opens again. New coasts, new cities, new adaptations. Modern skylines rise where ports once handled only sails. Glass replaces stone. Networks replace isolation. Yet even here, the land sets limits. Earthquakes remind towers where they stand. Storms redraw shorelines overnight. The illusion of control never lasts long. And beyond the cities, the old routes persist. Railways stretch across interiors, carrying people and goods through emptiness. From the window, the scale becomes clear. Hours pass without change. Then suddenly, an anomaly. A valley filled with colors that should not exist together. A mountain shaped too symmetrically to ignore. A lake that appears black at noon. These moments feel staged. They are not. They are the result of forces acting patiently, uninterrupted. At last, the journey slows. Ancient towns appear, built from the same rock they stand on. Streets follow contours, not grids. Markets open where rivers cross. Languages change over short distances. Traditions survive because geography protected them. And beyond that, nothing. Unreachable wilderness. No roads, no signals. Just terrain continuing as it has for millions of years. Mountains rise. Valleys sink. Weather moves through without noticing. This is a part of the world that does not need us, and perhaps never did. These places are not impossible because they are unreal. They are impossible because they resist simplification. They cannot be reduced to destinations or summaries. They demand time, distance, and respect. They remind us that Earth is not designed for convenience. It is designed for process. And that process is still underway. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Beyond the last settlement, the world does not end. It loosens. Road markings fade first. Then guardrails disappear. Asphalt fractures into gravel. Then into nothing at all. The map stops updating, but the land does not. It continues without annotation, without labels, without concern for who is watching. Here, scale becomes physical again. Distances stretch. Horizons retreat. A mountain that seems close takes a full day to reach, and by the time you arrive, it feels larger than it did before. The air thins. Sounds travel farther. Wind becomes the dominant voice. This is where the planet feels unfinished, not broken, not wild for drama's sake, but actively becoming. Rivers here do not hurry. They braid across wide plains, splitting and rejoining, undecided. Channels shift season to season. What was dry ground last year is underwater now. What looks permanent is provisional. Along their banks, life clusters tightly. Everything else is optional. Animals move with efficiency learned over generations. Nothing is wasted. Migration routes are memorized landscapes, not lines on a map. A mistake here is not an inconvenience. It is an ending, and yet life persists. Small human communities exist at improbable margins. High plateaus, wind-scoured coasts, valleys sealed by snow half the year. Their architecture mirrors restraint. Low profiles, thick walls, materials taken directly from surroundings. Nothing ornamental. Everything functional. These are not places people pass through. These are places they chose. Farther on, the land rises again. Mountain roads carve thin signatures across slopes that should not allow them. Switchbacks stack vertically, one mistake away from empty air. Weather changes without warning. Sunlight fractures through clouds, then vanishes entirely. At elevation, the world simplifies. Trees disappear first, then shrubs. Finally, even grass gives up. Rock remains. Ice remains. Sky dominates everything else. The sense of exposure sharpens. There is nowhere to hide from scale here. Glaciers slide quietly between peaks, slow enough to seem still, powerful enough to grind mountains down to dust. Their surfaces are cracked and blue, layered with debris collected over centuries. Each movement is small. Each effect is immense. Meltwater emerges from beneath them, cold and opaque, carrying sediment that once belonged to summits now far above. Rivers are born already heavy, already working. Beyond the high ground, the land breaks open again. Valleys appear where tectonic forces pulled the crust apart. Walls drop steeply. Heat rises from below. In some places, the ground itself breathes, steam venting through cracks, gases escaping from depths still hot with planetary memory. Colors here defy expectation. Yellow sulfur, white salt, black volcanic glass, reds oxidized by air and time. The palette is chemical, not aesthetic. Beautiful as a consequence, not an intention. These are landscapes that feel alien because they are honest. They reveal processes usually hidden. At the margins of these zones, water gathers again. Lakes form where the earth has nowhere else to send it. Some are shallow and temporary, evaporating as quickly as they appear. Others are deep and ancient, layered with histories of climate written in mud at the bottom. In still conditions, they become mirrors, perfect, unsettling. Mountains invert. Clouds double. The boundary between above and below dissolves. Disturb the surface, and the illusion breaks instantly. Farther south or north, direction loses meaning. The climate hardens again. Cold returns not gently, but absolutely. Snow accumulates faster than it melts. Ice locks landscapes into stillness for most of the year. Darkness stretches. Daylight compresses. Here, time is seasonal, not daily. People measure life in supplies, not schedules. Movement happens when conditions allow it. Patience becomes a skill as necessary as strength. Technology adapts but never dominates. Machines fail. Batteries die. Metal contracts. The environment sets the terms. And still, people remain. They fished through ice thick enough to hold vehicles. They herd animals across frozen ground. They tell stories calibrated to long nights, stories that compress generations into memory. Culture survives not because it's preserved, but because it is used. When the ice loosens, the land responds immediately. Plants erupt from soil that looked dead weeks before. Insects appear almost overnight. Birds return along routes older than history. The silence breaks all at once. This brief window sustains everything. Then it closes again. Across oceans, the pattern repeats differently. At sea, remoteness becomes total. No landmarks, no shelter, only swell direction and sky. Islands appear suddenly after days of nothing, rising steeply from deep water. These are not gentle arrivals. Cliffs take the first impact. Waves detonate against stone. Salt coats everything. Wind never fully stops. Vegetation grows low and tough, shaped permanently by exposure. Fresh water is precious. Soil is thin. Life here is negotiated daily. And yet, these islands hold complexity disproportionate to their size. Unique species, unique cultures, unique rhythms of survival. Isolation did not simplify them. It intensified them. Leave the islands behind, and the sea opens again. Currents move heat around the planet invisibly, regulating climates thousands of kilometers away. Storms gather energy across entire basins, then release it in focused violence against coastlines. From above, weather systems look elegant. From below, they feel absolute. Coasts bear the scars. Eroded headlands, collapsed arches, beaches that vanish and reappear with the seasons. Settlements retreat inland, then return, then retreat again. The negotiation never ends. Some cities embrace the water anyway. Ports grow where rivers meet oceans. Trade concentrates. People converge. Glass towers rise where mangroves once filtered sediment. Lights burn through night. Visible from orbit, these places feel powerful, organized, efficient. But even here, the land reminds them who is older. Floods rewrite streets. Earthquakes reset skylines. Heat waves expose limits. The illusion of permanence cracks. Beyond the city glow, darkness resumes. Forests spread uninterrupted for days of travel. Canopies block light. Understories tangle movement. Sound dampens. Orientation becomes difficult. In these interiors, decay is as important as growth. Fallen trees feed soil. Insects recycle wood. Fungi network beneath the surface, connecting life invisibly. This is not wilderness as absence. It is fullness. Move deeper, and traces of humans thin out again. Old trails fade. Structures collapse back into material. Metal rusts. Concrete fractures. Time reclaims without urgency. Eventually, there is only terrain. Mountains fold into each other endlessly. Plateaus stretch without variation. Plains expand until curvature becomes perceptible. This is a scale where the planet stops feeling personal. Here, the idea of ownership becomes absurd. And this is perhaps the most important realization of all. These places are not remarkable because few people visit them. They are remarkable because they operate entirely outside our attention. They do not require witnesses. They do not wait for documentation. They simply continue. The waterfalls will keep retreating. The volcanoes will keep venting. The deserts will keep shifting. The ice will advance and retreat according to forces larger than memory. Human history is a thin layer on top of all this. important, meaningful, fragile, but then, to see these places is not to conquer them, or even understand them fully. It is to be briefly aligned with a much longer story. To recognize that the planet is not static scenery, but an active system in motion, an impossible world only if we expect it to behave otherwise. And when we leave, when the cameras stop, when the routes fade, when attention moves on, the land does not change its behavior. It does not perform. It simply keeps becoming. Thanks for watching. See you soon. There's a moment, far from anywhere familiar, when the world stops asking for interpretation. No signs, no explanations, no sense that meaning is owed. The land simply exists in front of you, complete without approval. In these places, orientation changes. North and south lose urgency. Progress is no longer measured by distance covered, but by light remaining, by weather holding, by the body's quiet negotiations with fatigue. Time stretches. Decisions slow down. This is where modern urgency fails. Beyond the last reliable shelter, the ground itself becomes the archive. Every ridge tells a story of pressure and release. Every exposed face of rock reveals chapters stacked vertically, eras compressed into visible layers. Some are smooth, shaped by water long gone. Others are jagged, fractured by cold expanding inside stone. Nothing here is decorative. Everything is evidence. Plains roll outward with deceptive calm. From a distance, they appear empty, even simple. Up close, they are textured with subtle life. Low plants hugging warmth near the soil. Insects adapted to vanish against the colored dust. Animals that move only when necessary. Movement is costly here. Stillness is a strategy. Storms cross these open spaces without obstruction. There is no shelter to break the wind, no elevation to slow the clouds. Rain arrives suddenly, hard and brief, then disappears just as fast. When lightning strikes, it has nowhere else to go. The horizon absorbs everything. At night, the sky feels close, not because it descends, but because there is nothing competing with it. Stars fill every direction. The arc of the Milky Way becomes structure rather than spectacle. Darkness is complete, unbroken by distant cities. In that silence, scale shifts again. The planet feels less like a surface and more like a system. Air circulating, heat radiating, gravity holding everything in place. You are not standing on the Earth so much as inside its influence. Further on, the terrain tightens. Gorges appear abruptly, cut deep and narrow, hiding rivers that move faster than expected. The sound of water echoes between walls, amplified, directional, disorienting. Vegetation clings where it can, rooted in cracks, bending toward light that only reaches briefly each day. These corridors channel everything: wind, water, movement. They are efficient landscapes. Nothing unnecessary survives. Somewhere along these routes, traces of earlier lives surface. Stone foundations half swallowed by earth. Paths worn smooth by feet, that stopped passing centuries ago. Tools rusted into the ground, slowly becoming mineral again. There is no sense of abandonment here, only continuation. The land did not reject these people. It absorbed them. As elevation drops, heat returns in a different form. Humidity thickens the air. Breath feels heavier. Forests grow denser, layered vertically instead of spreading outward. Sound becomes constant. Movement in leaves, distant calls, water dripping endlessly. Here, nothing stays still for long. Growth accelerates. Decay follows immediately. Life recycles itself so quickly that death barely registers. Visibility shortens. Paths twist. Orientation depends on subtle markers. Slope, light angle, the feel the ground underfoot. Direction becomes intuitive rather than measured. These environments do not reward force. They reward attention. Beyond the forest edge, water dominates again. Floodplains stretch wide, seasonally erased and redrawn. Channels migrate. Islands appear and vanish. Settlements adapt by lifting structures, by moving, by accepting loss as routine. Fishing replaces farming. Boats replace roads. The rhythm of life follows the rise and fall of water levels rather than calendars. Here, the land is not owned. It is borrowed. Farther downstream, the river widens, slows, and eventually forgets where it came from. Sediment settles. Banks soften. The current relaxes. The river prepares to disappear into something larger. Deltas form, fractured landscapes where land and water argue continuously. Mangroves tangle roots into mud, stabilizing what would otherwise wash away. Birds arrive in numbers that feel impossible, drawn by abundance compressed into a narrow zone. These places feel temporary, even when they are ancient. Nothing here pretends to last forever. Then, the water opens. The sea removes reference points. Distance becomes abstract. The surface hides depth completely. Beneath it, terrain continues. Mountain ranges, trenches deeper than the highest peaks are tall, plains wider than continents. On the surface, life schemes. Below, pressure rules. Isolated atolls rise barely above the waves, built not by rock but by organisms, layer upon layer calcium deposited slowly. These structures survive only as long as conditions remain precise. Change the temperature, the chemistry, the currents, and the system collapses. Fragility and resilience coexist here, inseparable. Leave the ocean behind, and the land hardens again. Rock dominates. Vegetation thins. Rain becomes rare. When it does fall, it arrives with intensity, carving sudden channels through dry ground, then vanishing again. Dry riverbeds stretch for kilometers, silent most of the year. When water comes, they transform instantly, flooding moving debris, reshaping banks in hours what normally takes decades. The land remembers every event. Further inland, Salt flats reflect the skies so perfectly that depth perception fails. Walking feels like floating. Heat distorts distance. The horizon bends. Sound disappears almost completely. These are places that test perception. They strip away assumptions about color, distance, even gravity. The body becomes a primary instrument, constantly recalibrating. As night falls, temperature drops sharply. What burned now freezes. The swing is absolute. Survival depends on preparation, not optimism. Across these extremes, a pattern repeats quietly. The most severe environments are rarely empty. They are simply selective. Species here are specialists. Cultures here are deliberate. Nothing survives by accident. And then, unexpectedly, softness returns. High meadows open between ranges. Grass waves and wind cooled by altitude. Streams run clear and drinkable. Wildflowers bloom briefly, intensely, aware that the window is short. These spaces feel like pauses, not destinations, but breaths taken by the landscape itself. People gather here seasonally. Herds pass through. Camps rise and fall without scars. Movement defines belonging more than permanence. Above these meadows, snowfields linger year-round, feeding everything below. The relationship is clear. Remove the ice, and the system unravels. Farther along, the land fractures once more. Fault lines mark boundaries where pressure accumulates invisibly. Earthquakes release that pressure suddenly, rearranging the surface in seconds. What stood upright tilts. What was stable shifts. These events feel sudden only because the buildup was silent. Cities near these zones carry an unspoken awareness. Buildings flex. Infrastructure anticipates failure. Memory includes loss. Beyond the faults, the terrain smooths as if nothing happened. This contrast between violence and calm, between change and continuity, defines the impossible quality of these places, not because they are extreme, but because they hold contradiction without resolution. And perhaps that is the lesson beneath the spectacle. The world is not organized for comfort or clarity. It is organized for balance, dynamic, shifting, negotiated constantly between forces we barely perceive. To travel through these landscapes is not to collect views, but to encounter limits of the body, of technology, of certainty. And in doing so, something subtle happens. Perspective widens. The urgent shrinks. The permanent softens. Human concerns take their rightful place, not dismissed, but contextualized. These places do not offer answers. They offer proportion. They remind us that the planet is vast enough to contain extremes without explanation, old enough to absorb mistakes, and active enough to continue shaping itself regardless of observation. An impossible world only if we insist to conform to our expectations. Otherwise, it is simply Earth, unfinished, ongoing, and unconcerned with being understood. Thanks for watching. See you soon. There are places where arrival feels accidental, not because the journey was careless, but because the destination never advertised itself. No landmark announces importance. No dramatic shift signals that something rare has been reached. The land looks ordinary until it isn't. Subtlety is the rule here. A plain stretches out unbroken, its surface roughened only by grass and stone. From afar, it appears flat, predictable, but walk it long enough and patterns emerge. The ground rises and falls by centimeters, guiding water invisibly. Soil changes color without warning. Life clusters in pockets, so small they would be missed at speed. These landscapes reward slowness. They ask you to notice what does not move. Beneath the surface, entire systems operate unseen. Aquifers travel silently. Roots reach deeper than expected. Minerals dissolve and reform. What looks static is constantly rearranging itself, just out of sight. In places like this, the planet works quietly. Farther on, the quiet breaks. Wind accelerates as terrain narrows. Valleys act as funnels, turning gentle air into force. Sound sharpens. Speech shortens. Movement leans forward instinctively. Here, erosion is audible. Sand lifts and stings. Stone edges soften under constant abrasion. Over long spans of time, entire hills migrate downwind, grain by grain. Nothing dramatic happens at once. Everything dramatic happens eventually. Climb higher and the wind thins. Air grows lighter. Breath shortens. The body adjusts reluctantly. The sky deepens to a darker blue, not because of mood, but physics. The horizon sharpens. Distances become deceptive again. Peaks rise not as singular monuments, but as systems, ridges feeding ridges, shadows stacking on shadows. Snow lingers where sunlight cannot reach. Meltwater carves narrow channels that trace gravity precisely. At these heights, sound travels differently. A single movement echoes. Silence feels heavier than noise. And then unexpectedly, life appears again. Alpine plants hug the ground, flowering low and fast. Insects vibrate briefly, urgently. Animals move along established routes that avoid exposure. Nothing here wastes energy. Survival is efficient, not heroic. Descend the far side, and climate shifts abruptly. Clouds gather where slopes force air upward. Rain falls hard, localized, leaving nearby valleys dry. The land responds immediately. Vegetation thickens. Colors intensify. Growth accelerates. Water reshapes everything it touches. Streams cut new paths overnight. Slopes collapse and rebuild. Trees tilt, adapt, or fall. The landscape feels alive, not metaphorically, but mechanically, constantly adjusting to input. Somewhere in this transition zone, people settle, not because it is easy, but because it is possible. Homes align with terrain. Roofs slope for rain, not style. Paths follow contours rather than straight lines. The land dictates design. These communities understand cycles. They know when to plant, when to move, when to wait. Their knowledge is not written. It is practiced. Leave these zones and density dissolves again. Forests thin. Grasslands widen. The sky returns to dominance. Clouds become distant features rather than immediate events. Here, fire becomes a presence. Sometimes controlled. Sometimes not. Flames move faster than expected, driven by wind and fuel patterns. They clear old growth, release nutrients, reset ecosystems. Destruction and renewal blur together. The land remembers fire the way it remembers water, in scars that later become structure. Beyond the burn zones, regrowth tells its own story. New species appear first, adapted opportunity. Others follow later, slower, reshaping the balance again. Nothing returns exactly as it was. Move farther still, and the land grows older. Rock formations dominate again, rounded, weathered, stripped of sharpness. These are landscapes that have been exposed for unimaginable spans of time. Their edges are softened not by neglect, but endurance. Caves open into darkness that feels physical. Inside, temperature stabilizes. Sound dulls. Drips echo. Mineral formations grow millimeter by millimeter, patient beyond comprehension. Some chambers have never seen light. Others were known long before modern memory, marked subtly by hands that came and left without altering much. These underground spaces remind us that the planet has depth far beyond surface narratives. Return to daylight, and the contrast is jarring. Heat, wind, color, motion. Above ground, life continues its visible cycle. Below, the slow work never stopped. As routes extend outward, the land begins to show signs of strain. Not from overuse, but from transition. Glaciers retreat, exposing raw ground unprepared for immediate life. Coastlines adjust to changing seas. species shift ranges, searching for familiar conditions that are moving. These changes are not sudden in geological terms, but they are noticeable within a human lifetime. The land adapts. The question is whether everything else can. In some places, adaptation looks like abandonment. Villages empty slowly. Fields return to scrub. Roads crack and fade. Infrastructure loses relevance. Nature does not rush to reclaim. It simply resumes. Elsewhere, adaptation takes another form. Engineering pushes back. Walls against water, terraces against erosion, systems built to stabilize what was once dynamic. These efforts are impressive. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they delay the inevitable. The land does not negotiate. It responds. Beyond these contested zones, there are still places beyond response. Wilderness so vast that human influence dissipates quickly. Travel days without markers. No signal. No sound beyond wind and distant movement. Here, the idea of destination dissolves entirely. You're either moving or stopping. Both feel equally temporary. At night, the temperature drops, stars return, and the planet resumes its larger rhythm. Rotation, radiation, gravity. In moments like this, perspective shifts quietly. The need to name, to frame, to record feels unnecessary. Experience stands on its own. And this may be the rarest quality of all. Not beauty, not danger, but indifference. These places do not care if they're seen. They do not perform for cameras or memory. They exist whether acknowledged or not. That is their power. To encounter them is not to claim them, but to pass briefly through something that will continue unchanged long after. An impossible world, not because it defies reality, but because it refuses to center us within it. And perhaps that refusal is the gift. Thanks for watching. See you soon.